Hey everyone. Um, in the footage for this video, I am mining. I'm digging for diamonds and iron and gold, lapis, pretty much just resources. What I'm going to be talking about today is intelligence and self-awareness, pretty much. I think that without one, the other is useless. I think that they kind of play hand in hand in a person's, I guess, success. Not even necessarily success, but just like quality of life, you know? So let's get into that. Ever since I was in school, probably even before school, I was considered like a smart kid and now like a smart young man. I guess. I don't know. Throughout elementary school, I was always like kind of complaining to my parents about how school was just boring and too easy. I remember my teachers almost always having just positive stuff to say about me, and even now in college, I struggle with the classes that I'm taking, but it's only because the classes that I'm taking are like really hard and the workload is extremely heavy. But I still have never gotten like a C in a college level class. Yeah, not trying to flex or anything, just trying to get my point across. But I remember in elementary, even like middle and high school, 9 times out of 10, I didn't need to really try in order to do better than other people. But like that's just the academic stuff. I've talked about how I'm kind of socially awkward before. How I don't know if I've talked about my anxiety. I get pretty bad anxiety in like social settings. In elementary and middle school, I would say that I was not self-aware at all. Even high school, I think that I like started to gain some form of self-awareness, but it kind of went away at times, and then other times I was like a little bit too self-conscious, I guess, like thinking too much about the things that I'm doing and what I'm I don't know, how I'm acting. All of this, like me talking about how I've always done pretty well in school, like it kind of sounds like I'm flexing, but I want to admit something. I actually think that most of this is pretty useless now. Unless you're going into an occupation like being a doctor or a lawyer, some sort of situation where you have to have information like just stored in your mind. I don't think that intelligence is as important as it was like 40, 30, even like 20 years ago. It was much more important to just know things. Uh, Whereas now I can just hop on my phone and immediately Google it. Like I have the answer to pretty much any answerable question right in front of my eyes at all times, you know? I don't think that intelligence is as important as it was. That's not to say that it's completely useless, because I think that common sense and critical thinking are both actually really useful. I would actually argue that those two things, like critical thinking and common sense, are more awareness rather than intelligence, or at least kind of an area in between the two. I'm just talking about like academic intelligence, like knowing a chemistry equation, knowing how to solve something like that, or knowing the third play that Shakespeare wrote. 40 years ago, it wasn't like life saving to know I don't know, the capital of Brazil off the top of your head, but in certain occupations, it would be like really good information to have these sort of facts just kind of stored in there, just up there in your noodle, sitting around waiting for you to kind of just take them out for use. But now just Google it, bro. Like, it's you don't need to memorize this kind of stuff anymore. And that's what I'm kind of trying to get at, is this information that was really heavily focused on in school is not as nearly useful now as it used to be. And I think that that's where awareness kind of comes in. Like, self-awareness and intelligence have always been important. I just think that now awareness is probably more important than intelligence. I think that Steve Jobs and what's the Microsoft guy, Bill Gates, I think that they're both good examples of lots of intelligence, but not very much awareness. If you don't know, Steve Jobs died of like a pretty treatable form of pancreatic cancer, which is messed up, but the thing is, he didn't get the treatments for it. Like, he went an alternative route and started like eating vegan foods and doing a bunch of like alternative medicine type stuff, and that ended up killing him because he pretty much waited too long to get the treatment for his cancer. And much like Steve Jobs, I've actually had like a treatable form of cancer, and I did chemotherapy and radiation therapy to get it taken care of. And now I've been in remission for years. But Steve Jobs, infinitely smarter than I am, but he didn't have the self-awareness to recognize like the severity of his situation and how it would only get worse if he didn't treat it with the proper medicine needed. And then Bill Gates, on the other hand, I would say that he's kind of a pedophile, but not kind of a pedophile. He is a pedophile. His wife divorced him because of that shit. But anyways, just like begrudgingly pushing that stuff to the side. He's clearly a smart dude, but if you like look at his interviews and go back and look at like his workers complaining about the way that he's treating them, you can kind of tell that the guy's not fully self-aware. So I think they're both kind of examples of people who are very smart in one area, but not really aware enough to, I guess, expand their understanding of other things, that aren't how computers work. I guess I don't know. I have a hard time putting things into words sometimes, but I hope I'm getting my point across. I also think that having the awareness of what you're smart with or good at is like that's how you become successful off of that. Not even successful, but like make a change with that. If you're really, really good at math, but you like are just kind of like, it's just easy, and you don't really do anything with that, it doesn't matter, because you don't recognize that you're good at that thing. Like, who knows? We could have an Einstein, or like maybe 10 Einsteins somewhere out there in the world, but they're just fucking scrolling on Reels all the time, or looking at TikTok. Like, they're not actively pursuing anything. They're just kind of sitting there with this untapped skill or ability and just not doing anything with it. I would actually go as far to say that people who are very aware of themselves and just kind of understand how they tick and what they're good at and what they can do, what they can't do, and just overall like not intelligence, but they have a lot of what word am I looking for? I don't know, just a lot of cognizance, I guess. like, I would say that they, on average, are probably more successful than people who are just really smart with not a lot of awareness. Which, that's not really a claim that I can back up with a ton of evidence, since even just intelligence is something that's really difficult to measure. IQ is the closest metric that we have for it, and even that isn't all encompassing, as I think I've said before. But awareness is even harder to measure, like, not even just in ourselves, but in animals as well. Like, we're not 100% sure which animals are self-aware versus which ones aren't. We just have a general idea of which ones might be. But I do think that we have a problem with a lot of people just not being self-aware, not really being conscious, not being cognizant, you know? Especially now. I think that now, more than ever, we just have a lot of people who are zombies, you know? I don't like to use the word NPC, but there's a reason why that word has kind of blown up in popularity, because we have a bunch of people who are just computers and just kind of live their day-to-day life not really thinking. And you can't really blame these people either, because everything around us is like discouraging any deep critical thought. Our phones are constantly just like feeding us content, and we're really encouraged to kind of just sit and stare at a screen. You know, I've talked about this before. I will talk about it again eventually, but I don't want to yap too much about technology again. I feel like I'm starting to sound like an old man, just like yelling at the clouds. But yeah, I do think that we live in an era where actual like thought and awareness is completely like discouraged. And so, like, it's no wonder that awareness is starting to become more important than intelligence. And these aren't just like completely baseless claims that I'm making. I know I just said that it's hard to measure either of those, but like when it has been done, I'm thinking of like studies that have been done on people who work hard versus people who are super smart, like people who have discipline versus people who have intelligence. And discipline and awareness aren't the same thing, but I would say that the two probably connect to each other. Like, someone who doesn't have a lot of awareness probably isn't going to be very disciplined. And like studies have shown that being a hard worker it's more likely to bring you success than just being intelligent alone, you know? Just having a high IQ doesn't guarantee you success. But the reason I'm making this video is because I feel like I have a little bit of perspective on both ends of the spectrum. I would say that in the past I've been very focused on being intelligent and being perceived as smart, and just like not being dumb, I guess would be a good way of putting it. Like, all throughout high school I was kind of hyper fixated on like trying to be smarter than other people, which, like, just like the title of this video, intelligence isn't everything, you know? I kind of failed to recognize that, first of all, I'm never going to be the smartest person. Like, there's always going to be people smarter than me, probably in the same room, you know? And intelligence isn't like, there's not really like one form of intelligence. Like, I'm much more literate than a lot of people I know, because I read books. But I have friends who are way better at solving math problems and physics equations and probably chemistry equations too. So, like, which one of us is smarter, you know? I would argue that physics equations are harder, but then one of my friends like can't even write an essay without this is bad, but using generative AI, you know? So it's I really don't have an answer to the who is smarter question, you know? Or it's intelligence is in itself complicated. I was so fixated on being perceived as intelligent throughout high school that I wasn't really thinking about other aspects of how people were perceiving me. Like, I can remember certain conversations I had where I was like trying to be smart, and like even just thinking about them really makes me cringe. Like, I don't even know if I want to tell stories from that time. I remember bringing up like irrelevant topics that I was knowledgeable on out of nowhere. Yeah, I've had like a lot of cringy conversations where I was trying to show how smart I was. And I probably just came across as like either an asshole or just really weird, because I'd bring up topics out of nowhere that had nothing to do with the conversation that I thought I was knowledgeable on. And it got to a point to where like I'm this like 14, 15-year-old kid, and I'm having a conversation with an adult, and the adult's just kind of like telling me stuff, and I'm like, this person's fucking stupid. Like, are you serious? There are, like, being an adult does not make you smart automatically, but being in the middle of a conversation and just being like, I'm so much smarter than you is wild. Like, that's not normal. That is like borderline psychotic behavior. And I think that I worked through, I guess, these flaws, character flaws, of like wanting to be smart by just practicing a lot of self-reflection and introspection, you know, just kind of thinking. And I think a lot of people don't do that, you know. People aren't encouraged to do that anymore. Meditation is a good way to do that, but almost nobody does that. Like, the majority of people, when they hear meditation, they think of like a monk up in the mountains in a monastery or temple or whatever, just like chilling. And on it, that, if I'm being real, that does sound like a vibe, but that's not that's not what meditation has to be. And I actually would say that I overcorrected for a little bit. I started meditating, but it was for the wrong reasons. It was because, like, okay, I've maxed out intelligence points. Now I gotta max out spirituality points, I guess. And I started reading, like, random bullshit articles about opening your third eye. Like, if that's part of, like, your religious or spiritual beliefs, that's fine. But, like, I was fully bought in, and I thought I was gonna open my third eye by meditating. And, yeah, that clearly didn't work out. Maybe metaphorically it did, because it did end up making me more self-aware, and I was like, oh, I'm kind of crazy. I need to chill out. But, yeah, I think that just, like, thinking and being bored. Boredom is something that you need to experience, you know? I've heard this be said before, but the best ideas are born out of boredom, you know? Boredom is just something that we need in order to think, you know, in order to function. And now it's hard to be bored. It's easier to just never be bored, you know? It's easier to just go on your phone whenever there's any downtime at all. Just start scrolling or playing games or whatever, you know? So I think that ultimately, in order to kind of balance out the self-awareness to intelligence ratio, you gotta be bored a little bit. I try to be bored. Uh, Sometimes at work, I'll just like turn off my headphones and start thinking for a little bit, you know? Um, Also, I said I said self-awareness to intelligence ratio. You don't have to have either one. I think that people who don't have either one, they really lost the lottery, I guess, the genetic lottery. Um, just like I was saying earlier, though, meditation helps with this. Meditation will make you more aware because you're observing your thoughts as they're passing and just kind of letting them go. And it gives you almost like a stronger sense of self. And you start to really recognize that you are not your thoughts. You are who you are. And your thoughts are kind of just byproducts of other things going on in your life a lot of the time. But you don't even have to meditate. You can just like practice this in your day-to-day life. Next time you go to do something, think about why you do it. Think about your reasoning behind it. And if you don't like the reasoning that you have behind doing that thing and you don't like doing that thing, then change what you're doing and, you know, come up with like a new reason to do that. If you want to stop, I don't know, scrolling on reels, think about how much time you're wasting observing information and videos that you're not going to remember tomorrow. You know, if if you want to change something, then change it, you know? I think that this is the key reason why awareness now is more important than just straight up being smart, you know? Because someone could just tell you some random fact and you can be like, okay, how does this affect me? How does this affect others? And like, why does this matter? You know, someone's not necessarily smarter because they can recite a famous quote off the top of their head. And being able to kind of recognize that is important. Anyways, in short, I think that intelligence is obviously important. I'm just arguing that it's not as important as it used to be, and that awareness and being able to stop yourself from falling into these traps that are set up all around us is a little bit more important now. And obviously, like being knowledgeable on certain subjects in certain fields is really important. Like, it might not be if you have, let's just say you have like a history YouTube channel or you're a history teacher. Like, it wouldn't be the end of the world if you don't know every single date and every single historical fact off the top of your head. But being able to do that would make you much more efficient at your job. Anyways, I think that's all I really have for this video. I think I got about 13 diamonds total, including the pickaxe, so that's pretty sweet. Yeah, anyways, thank you for watching, and see you in the next one. Bye.